and you don't need to understand how to do it without that. So let me just move this over here real quick and get my ice out. All right, remember I told you the green, I'm going to blanch green beans because they're the easiest because we can chop them up and you can freeze the freezing handout. Mary is one of our Master Gardener volunteers, Master Wellness volunteers. And she's hopefully helping me recruit some more Master Wellness volunteers because we teach canning and freezing in the Master Wellness process. But on the freezing fruits and vegetables, it's going to tell you how to blanch about everything. And everything needs to be blanched before it goes in the freezer, except bell peppers and onions, because blanching stops the enzymes and it stops the ripening process. And blanching is very easy. You cut up your, I'm going to do the green beans. We're going to save some, they're not, here's some, they're not blanched. Boiling water. It probably says 2 minutes on the green beans. All of the foods say different. You dump it in here, you wait till it comes back to boil, and we're going to boil it for 2 minutes. So it stops the enzyme, it stops the ripening process, it kills bacteria where it's at, and it's going to keep your produce looking fresher and tasting fresher. Okay, we're going to pretend this is 2 minutes. Did y'all see the 2 minute clock go on? I did.
There's a 2 minute timer there.
If you look, I'll leave those up there so you can look. It makes the color so much prettier. Blanching really is going to make the color prettier. So we're going to take these and we're going to just dump them, pour the water off. And then I'm going to stick them in ice water immediately. And I'm through blanching. That's all the blanching requires. Because people say, oh, I didn't blanch it. But if you're going to take the time to freeze it, take the time to blanch it. You roll them around in here until they're cold to touch. We'll use the same little bowl to put it back in.
Did you say bell peppers and onions don't need to be
Bell
frozen?
peppers and onions are the only ones that don't need to be blanched before you.
How about the banana peppers?
Any of the peppers you're okay sticking in the freezer. But the caveat is I'm going to cook with them when I get them out, and cooking is going to kill the bacteria. You know, if you blanch bell peppers, you're going to have pepper skin. Okay. So then I pack my bags. If you're going to freeze your bags. All plastic is made from different chemicals. You guys know that. The only plastic that's meant to go in your freezer is plastic meant to go in your freezer. So you want to make sure whatever kind of bags you use are recommended for the freezer. All right. I like this. These say freezer. I did get the freezer bags. I did. And they have these new little freezer containers. Most of the jars will freeze. So whatever, you know, can you reuse your little cooler containers and butter containers? Well, they're not meant to go in the freezer. So we've heard a lot about plastic leaching and plastic in the news lately. If you want to do that, use a freezer bag inside of it. Use your container to hold the shape, and then after it's frozen, take it out and reuse your container to put something else in to hold the shape. That's how I do. I use them to hold the shape, especially if I'm doing like steamed squash or something where it's going to take up shape. All right. Close your bag all but the very end. Put it under the water. Just kind of mush it around with your finger. Close it.
Keeping the top out.
Keep the top out.
Yeah.
But look, you vacuum seal it. And you don't need Marilyn's little tool.
I do like my little vacuum.
Well, the little vacuum thing's going to leave a hole. This is going to keep your stuff fresher because the little vacuum thing still has a hole. So that's all you do. And if I have one, if I buy the meat and separate the meat, I put one pork chop in each bag. Do the same thing with my pork chops. I just fill my sink up, keep my little finger in it, put it under water, squish the air out, move this, pull my finger, and then I have my little vacuum packed pork chops, and everything stays fresher. Your enemy in the freezer is air, and so you want the air out of your stuff. And the best way to do it is to vacuum pack or use one of those kinds of systems to do it. It also makes it a lot easier to store more stuff because you don't have all that air stored in stuff.
Does it have to be ice water or just tap water?
If you're going to use ice water, it's going to lock in the color.
You mean for the blanching or for the?
Oh, for the vacuum? Oh, yeah, I just use a tap. I just do my sink and just tap water.
Is steaming exactly the same thing as blanching? Or
some foods that you can't steam and need to be blanched.
Steaming will have have the moisture coming up to it. Blanching is going to have the water surrounding it, so everything is covered by the boiling water. So you want to blanch. You don't, steam is not considered blanching. Now, sometimes in my, if I'm going to freeze cantaloupe, or we had a lot of calls about cabbage last week. Y'all must have a lot of cabbage. We had a lot of cabbage calls last week. And they were going to freeze cabbage. It tells you in there that you can blanch cabbage and freeze it. But the way I like to do cauliflower and cabbage and those things is to go ahead and cook it and freeze it already cooked. Then when I bring it out again, I use it for squash casserole or broccoli. You know, I use it as a casserole because it doesn't freeze very well. Things with really high moisture contents like that, they don't freeze very well.
Is your burner still on with the hot too?
Yes, thank you. He
I can
was.
smell it.
Thank you. We had trouble getting him to boil. We were just excited. And I don't know if you can see these, but the blanching, these are the blanched and those are the not blanched. Yes, blanch is going to make everything prettier. Broccoli, when you blanch broccoli, put it in the freezer, it is so pretty. If you just stick it in the freezer, it won't be.
What about parsley or cilantro? Can you freeze it? Parsley.
You can freeze it. It works better if you, some people recommend drying and then throwing it in the freezer. Because if you, but it depends on how you're going to use it at the end. If you're going to cook with it in soups and stews, you can rinse it. Now that's where some people will say that you can use a little bit of sanitizing solution to rinse it in because you're not going to cook it. That's up to you. There's no recommendations on that right now. Pat it dry and then you can throw it in your freezer and then cook with it in soups and stews. And if you want drying and freezing herbs, let Mary and I will work with you. We'll get your name or address or get you some cards so you can call me. I didn't bring the drying and freezing herb.
I have one more question about the sanitizing or doing anything. Do you use bleach? Is it possible to use hydrogen peroxide in place of the bleach?
You need to visit with your physician if there's a reason you're doing that. Bleach is the one that's going to kill the most bacteria. Hydrogen peroxide isn't going to kill as many bacteria as bleach is going to kill. And bleach is going to have less chemical residue as the air dries, and peroxide is for canning and freezing purposes. Now, you know, some people who have cancer, some people use alcohol. You can use alcohol to wipe and sanitize, but there again you have to be a little more careful because of the toxicity. But remember, it's a little bit of bleach and a lot of water, not a lot of bleach and a little bit of water. Y'all are laughing, but if you go in and it smells like a lot of bleach, it's too much bleach. Does anybody have any more questions?
Would you talk a little bit about drying? I mean, we love to make zucchini chips and make okra chips and things like that. If they're washed before you slice them and dry them, is there any particular thing to know or not to know?
No, we do have some trouble. Those of you who like to dry do know that the humidity affects how we dry and what we dry. And so we recommend that you, if you're going to dry, you invest in a dryer just because of the humidity and quality control. And it doesn't mean you have to use a dryer. It just means that it's easier, it's going to give you better results. You know, Miss Food Safety has to tell you what's going to give you the best bang for your buck in safety. But you can dry in the oven. And I don't know if any of those are drying or not. Did we put drying in there, Mary? If you go to Home Food Safety Preservation, the National Home Center for Food Safety Preservation, there's a whole bunch of stuff on drying. It'll tell you how to dry your herbs, it tells you how to dry your vegetables, it tells you what time, what the moisture level, and how long things have to be dried. It tells you how to do them in the oven, or how to do them with the dehydrator, and how to air dry. And so it will tell you that on the website. Because the humidity here is such a...
You can also put them in ice cubes.
Yes, you can put your herbs in ice cubes and use the ice cube to cook with. You can do that with your onions and your bell peppers too if you want to.
One of the things my sister's done, she works for the FDA in Georgia, University of Georgia, but she takes the large zucchinis and she takes off the skin, peels them and takes the seeds out and grates them and dehydrates the grated zucchini. And then once it's dehydrated, she puts it in a freezer bag and puts it in the freezer. But then she takes out a handful of dried zucchini and drops it in her chili or in her stew or whatever she's making to thicken the stew,
Yeah.
and yet still